right? So if you look at the 5 shocks: diagnosis, treatment, recurrence or metastasis, third shock, no hope, which is the fourth shock, and end of life, which is the fifth shock. In a way, this is the entire spectrum of the cancer journey. And the issues that people face at each of these shocks is fundamentally different.
Yeah.
Now, the ecosystem of cancer care does not really take this into account. So, as I said before, the cancer journey is not only a difficult one, it's also a long one. Right? It lasts for many years, unlike many other illnesses. And people go through a very tumultuous and time filled with great turmoil.
Yeah.
And so what we realized working with people and doing all the research that we did is that the cancer journey basically can be brought down to these 5 shocks, as we call them, or the 5 phases in the cancer journey. So let me explain each one of them. The first shock is when you're diagnosed. For most people, it comes out of the blue. For most people, the shock and trauma of being told that you have cancer is something that really, it punches a hole in your self-esteem. And people are really taken aback by a cancer diagnosis. And because in our society, cancer is immediately associated with death and mortality, the first thoughts that go through people's mind is
dead end.
Dead end.
Yeah.
My life is over.
Yeah.
Right. And because we are unprepared to deal with death, it has a tremendous amount of psychological, emotional, spiritual, relational, physical impact.
Yeah.
Right. So the first shock is just that of the diagnosis itself. The second shock is when you start getting your treatments. Because suddenly you have to become an expert in medical things.
Yeah.
You have to learn a lot of new language, you have to go and get all kinds of tests done, CT scan, PET scan, ultrasound, all kinds of tests and blood tests and this and that and the other. And even the treatments themselves, surgery is a violation of the body.
Yeah.
Chemotherapy is basically they are giving you carefully calibrated doses of poison, right, which your body has to deal with. Similarly, in radiotherapy, they are going to give you calibrated doses of radiation, which is bad for us, as we all know, right? So as you go through that process, you suddenly feel that you are no longer the person you were. You just become a number, a hospital number. Or you just become this colon cancer or that breast cancer. So there are some real challenges with the treatment, but there are also challenges with the psychological makeup of the individual in that second shock. Yeah. And that second shock period can last somewhere between a few weeks to a few months. The third shock is when you are told that either your cancer has recurred, or your cancer has spread, or that the treatments have not been successful in arresting the cancer. Right? Now, I was lucky that I escaped after the second shock. Right? But not everybody is so lucky. In fact, most people are not going to escape in the second shock. They're going to go through the third shock. Yeah. The third shock is more severe than the second shock because suddenly you realize that all the effort that had been put in, all the money that was spent, all the doctors who put in their best, it hasn't worked. Now what happens is that the medical treatments become more intensive, more aggressive. People try to say, take this experimental drug, try this, try that, all kinds of stuff you're trying. You're more confused than ever. Yeah. And you know that things are not going well for you. And now you're really worried about the future. You're thinking about what's going to happen to my family, my plans and my career and all of that stuff. So that has a slightly different kind of a experience, the third shock.
Yeah.
Again, if you're lucky, you may escape from that third shock, but most people don't. Then you get the fourth shock. And the fourth shock is when the doctor tells you that we've done everything we could, nothing more to be done, now there is no hope. Now you have to come to terms with the fact that your life is going to end at some stage. This in technical terms is called palliative care, right? Where the effort is to keep you comfortable and pain-free. This has very different issues because now you're confronting your own mortality, your impending mortality. And people need different kind of a help at this kind of a stage. And the fifth shock is the shock that we call the end of life, which is when death is not far away. Maybe it's a few days or a few weeks away. And that has a completely different impact on the individual, the family, and his ecosystem. Right? So if you look at the 5 shocks, diagnosis, treatment, recurrence or metastasis, third shock, no hope, which is the fourth shock, and end of life, which is the fifth shock. In a way, this is the entire spectrum of the cancer journey. And the issues that people face at each of these shocks is fundamentally different. Now, the ecosystem of cancer care does not really take this into account. And so therefore, the purpose of Cancer Awakens is to provide a structured and a tailored program for the individual and from the family, delivered by people who have an experience, a same experience, and have been well trained, so that the trauma and the suffering are reduced
across all of these.
We may not be able to change the physical outcome, but we can certainly help the person heal throughout this journey.